Hi, I'm Chad with Move for Guitar. This lesson is from our series Music Theory for Guitar. In this lesson, I'm going to show you how to figure out what key a chord progression or a song is in. First off, download our free e-guide, Music Theory for Guitar. It contains everything that I'm talking about in this lesson, all the charts and diagrams, as well as much more, so it'll be really useful to you. And like I said, it's free, so there's no reason not to just go download that. But I am working on it right now as I'm filming this lesson, so it may not be available as you're watching this lesson. And if it's not available yet, it'll say coming soon. And if you'd like to get notified when it is available, you can sign up for our mailing list, and we'll send you a notification for when it is available and let you download it. And also, if you're signed up for our mailing list, you'll receive all updated versions as well. But don't worry, you don't need the e-guide to follow along with this lesson because all the charts and diagrams will be on the screen. And also, we add at least one new lesson every day, so be sure to subscribe. This is part 2.13 from our series Music Theory for Guitar. If you'd like to go back and start at the beginning, you can click the link on the screen. So in the last lesson, we talked about chord progressions from the major scale, and we talked about diatonic chord progressions in one key. And in this lesson, I'm going to show you how to look at a sequence of chords, which is a chord progression, and figure out what key they're coming from. And we're going to be talking about the major scale keys still, and we're only going to be talking about chord progressions diatonic to one key, meaning we're only dealing with one key at a time. And we'll get into chord progressions that change keys in future lessons, but right now it's important just to understand it diatonic to one key. So we're going to use this chart that's on the screen, this diagram, to figure this all out. So what we're going to do, we're just going to start with a random sequence of chords like you have on your screen. And by looking at this and referencing the diagram, we're going to figure out what key this chord progression is in. And this is an extremely important thing to understand as a guitarist. You have to be able to look at chord progressions and figure out the key, especially when you start getting into improvising or soloing. That is a crucial thing to understand. So what we have here is A major, E major, F sharp minor, and D major. So if we go back to our chart, the way we start is, since we know the first chord is major, we're going to look through this first column of major and look for an A, which obviously is right here. It's the first one. The next chord was E major, so we're going to look in this same column of A major and look for an E major. So if we go through here, we find an E. That is major, so we know those first two chords fit in this key of A major. I'm going to look at the next chord. It's F sharp minor. Go back, look for an F sharp in here. We find it right here. There's an F sharp minor right here. So we know all three of those chords are in here. So look at the last chord. It's a D major. Go back into the key of A, look for a D. Here's a D. It's a D major. We know that that progression is from the key of A. And if we look at it, it's A, E, F sharp, D. So A is the one chord, E is the 5, F sharp is the 6, and D is the 4. So we know it's a 1, 5, 6, 4 in the key of A. So now we'll do another one. We'll do B flat major, E flat major, F major. So we go to that diagram again. We look for a B flat major in the first column because that's our first major. We find it right here. The next one was E flat major, so we go through here and look for an E flat. There's one right here. It is a major, so that's in here. Those two are both in the key of B flat so far. And then we look for an F major because that was the next one. And there's one right here. It is a major, so we know that that is in the key of B flat. And we know that it's a 1, 4, 5 in the key of B flat. So those were both pretty simple because they were the first ones we ran across. They started with an A for the first one. It just ended up being in the key of A. So let's do another one that's a little trickier. And this one is C, D, G. So you might just assume that that's in the key of C. So if we look starting with the first column, which we know is major because we had a C major to start with, we have that C major in the key of C. The next chord was a D, so if we look through the key of C, we find a D, but that was a D major, and what we have in the key of C is a D minor. So we know that a D major does not fit in the key of C, so now we have to look in another key to find what key that progression is in. So now the first chord was a C major, so we go to the next major. We started right here on this major and went through the column. Now we go to the next major to see if it works out. So we start here on the 4 chord and we look down through the column for our C. Here's a C, and that's in the key of G, so it's a 4 chord of the key of G. The next chord was a D major, so if we look through and look for a D, we find a D here. It is a major chord, so those 2 chords are in this key. They're both in the key of G. And the last one was G major, so we're in the key of G. Obviously there is a G major in the key of G because every major scale, the first chord you build off the first note is a major chord. So we know that we have those 3 chords are out of the key of G, so that means it's in the key of G. And we started with C, so that's a 4. Next one was D, which is a 5, and then 1 for the G, so we know it's a 4-5-1 in the key of G. Then we're going to look at another option that's different from the rest. This is a D major, A major, B minor. So if we go back to our chart, we look for our first D major, look in the first major column, we have a D major obviously in the key of D. Our next chord was A major, so in the key of D we look for an A. We have one right here, it's a major, so those 2 are in the key of D. And then the next chord was a B minor, so we look through here for a B, it's right here, and it is a minor, so those 3 chords do fit in the key of D. And we would know if it was in the key of D, it would be a 1, 5, 6. But this one's a little different because we actually have another option. So if we go back to our chart and we look in the next major column on the 4 chord, if we look for a D, we have one right here. So there is a D major in the key of A. The next chord was a major, so obviously there's an A major chord in the key of A. And the next chord was a B minor, and if we look through here, there's a B here, it's a minor, it's a 2 chord in A. So those 3 chords actually fit in the key of A as well. So those 3 chords together could be a 4, 1, 2 in the key of A. So when you run into a situation like this, you don't have enough information just looking at those 3 chords to know what key they're in. The likelihood is that it would be in the key of D because the majority of popular music starts on the 1 chord, but it doesn't have to be. You would have to hear other parts of the song, so if there was another section with different chords, you'd have to see if there was any sign that would tell you that it was in a different key, or you'd have to listen to the instrumentation or the melody of the singer to know if it was in the key of D or in the key of A. And there's a few things that you can look out for that will help you quickly be able to see what key a song is in. And we're talking about if a song is diatonic to 1 key. We're not talking about if it changes keys. Again, we'll save that for later. But many songs are just in 1 key. So one thing that you can look for is 2 major chords a whole step apart. Because in a major scale key, where 2 major chords are a whole step apart, happen on the 4 chord and the 5 chord. These 2 chords are a whole step apart. So if, for example, if you were to see a D major and an E major, you would know it's the key of A because that's where they would land. They would land on the 4 chord and the 5 chord, and D is the 4 of A, E is the 5 of A. Or if you saw a G and an A major together, you would know it's the key of D because G is the 4 of D, A is the 5 of D. So anytime you see 2 major chords, 1 whole step apart, you know if that song is in 1 key, that it's a 4 chord and a 5 chord of a specific key. So you just look to these 2 columns and find them. And then you're quickly able to see what key it's in. Another thing to look out for is 2 minor chords a whole step apart, because the only place that happens is on the 2 chord and the 3 chord. So if you were to see a B minor and a C sharp minor, you'd quickly be able to tell that it's in the key of A because B is the 2 chord of A and C sharp is the 3 chord of A. And the 2 chord and the 3 chord are the only place where it happens that 2 minor chords are a whole step apart. Another thing to look out for is 3 major chords because every major key has 3 major chords in it. It's the 1, 4, 5. So if you see 3 major chords together, look through the 1, 4, 5 column and you'll find them quickly. So for example, if you see a D major, a G major, and A major, you'll be able to quickly see it's in the key of D because those are where the 3 major chords land. And one more thing, although you won't run into this in most popular music, you'll run into it a lot when you get into more advanced blues or jazz, is if you see a diminished chord, you know it's only coming out of one key. So diminished chords always land on the 7th chord of a major scale, and there's only one diminished chord in each key. So for example, if I saw an A diminished chord, I would quickly be able to know that it was in the key of B flat because A diminished only falls in the key of B flat. Or if I saw C diminished, I would quickly know it's in the key of D flat because there's only one C diminished in the major scale keys and it's in the key of D flat. So that's a little theory to help you figure out what keys a chord progression is in. If you're still a little unsure, although I'm sure you're able to use this chart and figure it out, don't worry, we'll get more and more into it as we go through these lessons. And don't worry about memorizing all this information right now. That's why I provided these diagrams so that you can look it up and it's something you'll memorize down the road. Don't get stuck thinking you need to memorize this before moving on. It's not that important right now as you're learning guitar. It's something you can learn as you go along and you can learn it slowly. So just go ahead and move on to the next lesson where I'm going to change gears a little bit and talk about open triads. And be sure to download that e-guide. It has all these diagrams in it that you'll get a lot of use out of. And be sure to subscribe because we add at least one new lesson every day.